A successful but unhappy businessman has always carried the pain of his infertility and the emptiness of not being able to be a father. When he finds two hungry girls in his mansion, something strange awakens inside him, as if it were more than a simple coincidence. One of them, with the eyes of the woman he lost, makes him wonder if those children are his biological daughters. Chapter 1. The fine May rain fell over New York City like a grey curtain, blurring the windows of the office on the 23rd floor. Robert Anderson watched the city below, the car lights forming luminous rivers on Park Avenue, and felt that familiar emptiness tighten in his chest. It was always like this at the end of the day, when the office buzz fell silent and he was left alone with his thoughts. The city continued its frantic rhythm, millions of people rushing from one place to another, living their lives, building their families. And there he was, at the top of a skyscraper, watching it all from a distance like a spectator who didn't belong in that world. At 45, he had achieved everything a man could desire in the business world. His construction company was one of the most respected in the country. His development spread across the entire United States, and his fortune was envied by many. Business magazines vied for interviews with him, young entrepreneurs saw him as a role model, and his signature on a contract was worth millions. He had everything. And at the same time he had nothing, because none of it, absolutely none of it, filled the hole that existed inside him. A void that grew with each passing day, with each completed project, with each success achieved. It was as if he were climbing an infinite mountain, always ascending, always conquering new heights, but never reaching anywhere worthwhile. His secretary knocked lightly on the door before entering, carrying a folder with documents to sign. Claudia had worked with him for 10 years, knew every detail of his routine, every mood, every silence. She placed the papers on the desk carefully, as she always did, and waited in silence. Robert nodded, picked up the Mont Blanc pen his wife Patricia had given him 2 years ago, an expensive and impersonal gift, and began to sign mechanically. Each signature was an automatic gesture, devoid of meaning. Contracts, agreements, partnerships, numbers, and more numbers. He built buildings, erected skyscrapers that touched the clouds, but he couldn't build the one thing he truly desired, a family, a real family, with laughter on Sunday mornings, drawings on the walls, toys scattered around the house. A family that would give meaning to it all. The diagnosis had come almost 15 years ago, on a cold July. Day he would never forget. He was in Dr. Harrison's office, one of the best urologists in the country, listening to words that sounded distant, as if coming from far away. Infertility, low sperm count, chances close to zero. The technical terms blurred together, but the message was clear. He would never be a father. Not in the natural way, not in the way he had always imagined. The word infertility sounded like a death sentence, a weight he had carried in silence ever since. No one knew, not his partners who worked with him every day, nor his closest, friends with whom he played golf on Saturdays. It was a secret locked away, something that made him feel less of a man, less capable. Only Patricia, his wife, knew the secret that was slowly corroding their marriage day after day, like an invisible rust. They had tried everything. They spent fortunes on expensive treatments, fertility clinics that promised miracles, trips for consultations with the best doctors in the world, from Switzerland to the United States. Hormones, invasive procedures, hopes renewed with each cycle only to be shattered again. Nothing worked. It was like being trapped in an endless cycle of expectation and disappointment, and with each failed attempt, the abyss between him and Patricia deepened, becoming an insurmountable chasm. Robert closed the folder and dismissed the secretary with a tired gesture. He glanced at the clock. It was already past 8 in the evening. Patricia was probably at home, but he knew she wouldn't be waiting up for him. For the past few months they had barely spoken. She had become a stranger who shared the same house with him, a silent presence that constantly reminded him of his failure as a man. He took his jacket from the back of the chair and headed for the elevator. The walk to the parking garage was lonely at this hour. His footsteps echoed in the empty corridor, a sound that seemed to amplify the loneliness he felt. When he got into the car, a black Mercedes that smelled of new leather, Robert sighed deeply. Another day ended just like all the others. The traffic was surprisingly light for a weekday. The rain sometimes had that effect, scaring off some drivers who preferred to stay home. He drove on autopilot, his thoughts wandering to places he tried to avoid during the day when work kept him busy and distracted. But at night, alone in the car, there was no escape. Inevitably, his mind went back to Julianne. It always went back to her, no matter how much time passed, no matter how many years had accumulated since he last saw her. It was like a wound that never fully healed, always there, throbbing quietly, waiting for the right moment to hurt again. Julianne Foster. Even the name still caused a sharp pain in his chest, as if someone were sticking a sharp blade between his ribs and twisting it slowly. They had met at university, more than 20 years ago, on a sunny afternoon in March. Robert remembered every detail of that day. He was in the library, surrounded by civil engineering books, when she walked in. Julianne wore a simple floral dress and carried a huge portfolio of drawings. She asked for permission to sit at the same table, and when their eyes met, Robert felt something he had never felt before. It was love at first sight, the kind that seems destined, written in the stars, like in the stories his grandmother used to tell him when he was a child. Julianne was studying architecture. He was studying civil engineering. A perfect match, they used to joke. She designed the dreams, he turned them into reality. She was different from all the women he knew, who moved in his world of privilege and superficiality. Julianne didn't come from a wealthy family like his. She worked to pay for her studies, gave private drawing lessons at night, saved every penny. There was a determination in her eyes that fascinated him, an inner strength that shone through her smile. She was strong, independent, a dreamer. She had plans, goals, a vision, for the future built with her own hands. And he fell head over heels in love. They had 2 years of pure happiness, 2 years in which Robert discovered what it was to truly live, to feel every moment intensely. They would spend hours talking about architecture and engineering, about how they wanted to change the world, to build buildings that were both works of art and functional. They had picnics in Central Park, walked hand in hand down Fifth Avenue on Sundays, shared cheap sandwiches and expensive dreams. But their love did not have a happy ending. Fairy tales, Robert learned the hard way, didn't exist in real life. His mother, Margaret Anderson, never accepted their relationship from the moment she found out about it. To her, Julianne was just an opportunist who wanted to take advantage of the family's fortune, a poor girl trying to climb the social ladder at her son's expense. It didn't matter that Julianne had never asked for anything, that she paid her own bills, that she refused expensive gifts. For Margaret, people like Julianne did not mix with people like them. It was a matter of class, of different worlds that should not touch. Margaret was a powerful woman, heir to a fortune built over generations, accustomed to controlling everyone and everything around her with an iron fist. She commanded the family like a general commands an army, and she would stop at nothing to separate her son from the woman she considered completely unsuitable. And Robert, as much as he loved Julianne, was still too young, too insecure, too dependent on his mother's approval. Robert still remembered the last argument with his mother, 2 days before he broke up with Julianne. It was a Tuesday night, and he had been summoned to Margaret's private study in the family mansion. She was sitting behind an old rosewood desk, illuminated by the dim light of a lamp, looking like a judge about to deliver her verdict. Margaret had been relentless that night, using every possible argument to convince him that the relationship was a mistake that would ruin his life. She spoke of responsibility, of the family name, of the empire that awaited him. She showed him financial spreadsheets, contracts, opportunities that would be lost if he insisted on this relationship. She spoke of more suitable women, daughters of businessmen and politicians who would be ideal partners for a man in his position. And then came the threats, cold and calculated. Margaret threatened to disinherit him, to take away his chance to take over the family business that was his birthright, to destroy any future he might have in the company. She had contacts, influence, power. She could make him disappear from the corporate world with a few strategic phone calls. And Robert, at only 23, young and insecure, without enough experience to support himself, gave in. He gave in like a coward. That was the thought that tormented him to this day. He broke up with Julianne over the phone, unable to look her in the eye to see the pain he knew he would cause. He mumbled empty excuses, said it wasn't working, that it was better to go their separate ways. He heard the silence on the other end of the line, a silence that lasted an eternity. Julianne didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't scream. She just said, in that soft voice he loved so much, now laden with deep sadness, "I understand. Take care, Robert." And she hung up. He never saw her again. Julianne disappeared from his life like a dream that fades upon waking, leaving only the painful memory of what could have been. He tried to find her a few times in the following years, driven by remorse and a longing that wouldn't go away. He called mutual friends, went to the places they used to frequent, even hired a discreet investigator. But Julianne had moved away, vanished completely, as if she had never existed, and he eventually married Patricia, a woman of the same social class, with a degree in business administration, enthusiastically approved by his mother. Perfect in all the social roles expected of her. Patricia was beautiful, educated, knew how to behave at business dinners and charity events. She was the ideal wife on paper, but she never touched his heart in the same way, never made him feel the fire that Julianne ignited within him with a simple glance. The traffic light turned red at the corner of Broadway. Robert stopped the car and closed his eyes for a moment, trying to push away the memories. It was useless to dwell on the past. Julianne had surely moved on, built her own life, maybe even married and had children. The thought made him feel a sick envy. She probably had everything he couldn't have. A real family. The light turned green and he headed towards the Upper East Side, the affluent neighborhood where his mansion was located. The house was enormous, with manicured gardens, a swimming pool, a full leisure area. But it was empty as his heart. When he parked in the garage, Robert noticed that the living room lights were on. Patricia was still awake. He sighed, bracing himself for another night of uncomfortable silences. He picked up his briefcase and walked to the main entrance, climbing the marble steps that led to the door. It was then that something caught his attention, a subtle movement in the shadows near the well-kept shrubs that flanked the gate. At the front gate, partially hidden behind one of the stone pillars that marked the entrance to his property, were two small figures huddled together. Robert stopped on the last step, squinting to see better in the dim light. The exterior lighting created shadows that made it difficult to see, but he could make out small, childlike outlines. They were children, two girls who looked to be about 7 or 8 years, old, wearing ragged, dirt and mud-stained clothes, their disheveled, rain-dampened hair falling over their thin faces. They were clinging to each other, shivering from the cold despite the mild New York night. Robert stood there, torn between going inside and pretending he hadn't seen anything, or approaching them. For a moment he considered simply ignoring them and going inside, locking the heavy mahogany door and returning to his life of comfort and emptiness. The city was full of homeless miners. It was a sad but common reality on the streets of New York. He had passed dozens, hundreds of them, and never stopped. What would make this time any different? But something made him hesitate. Maybe it was the way they were holding each other, protecting one another from the cold and fear. Maybe it was the time of day, that vulnerable moment when his defenses were down. Or maybe it was that emptiness inside him, searching for some purpose, some way to feel human again, to do something that truly mattered. With a heavy sigh, Robert began to approach slowly, his steps cautious on the wet pavement, trying not to frighten them. The girls noticed his movement and huddled, closer, like cornered animals ready to flee at the slightest sign of danger. When he got closer, just a few feet away, the girls lifted their faces and looked at him. Their eyes were large, frightened, but also strangely hopeful, as if they still had some faith that someone might help them. And it was in that precise moment when the streetlight illuminated the older girl's face that Robert felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under his feet and he was falling into an infinite abyss. The older girl's eyes were identical to Julianne's, it wasn't. A vague resemblance, a fleeting impression that the mind creates when tired. It was nothing like that. It was exactly the same gaze, the same greenish color, with little golden flecks that looked like footprints of the sun, the same deep expression that seemed to carry entire worlds within. The same almond shape, the same delicate eyebrows, even the same way of slightly parting her lips when she was nervous. It was like looking at Julianne at 8 years old, as if someone had traveled back in time, captured her essence as a child, and brought it to the present. Robert stood paralyzed, unable to breathe, unable to look away from that thin, dirty little face that seemed to have come straight from his deepest, most secret memories. The younger girl, clearly her sister, had slightly different but still familiar features. They were twins, he realized, but not identical, and both had something about them that made him think of Julianne, a resemblance that went beyond physical characteristics, something in their expression, their posture, the way they tilted their heads. His heart was racing, beating so hard he could hear the blood pounding in his ears. It couldn't be. It was impossible. He was infertile, always had been. There was no way these children were his. But then why did they look so much like her? Why did those eyes pierce him this way, as if revealing a secret he didn't even know existed? With a choked voice, Robert managed to ask, "Are you okay? Are you lost?" The older girl squeezed her sister's hand and took a step forward, showing a courage that contrasted with her fragile appearance. "We're hungry, sir. Could you give us something to eat?" Her voice was soft but firm, just like Julianne's voice when she asked for something. Robert felt a tightness in his chest, an emotion he couldn't name. Without thinking, he nodded. "Come with me." The girls hesitated for a moment, looking at each other as if communicating silently. Then, carefully, they followed Robert to the house. He opened the door and led them inside, turning to the security guard who appeared at the entrance. "It's all right, Reynolds. They're my guests." The security guard raised an eyebrow, surprised, but said nothing. Robert took the girls to the kitchen, a huge area with mahogany cabinets and granite countertops that gleamed under the lights. He opened the refrigerator, taking out fruit, cheese, bread, juice. He put everything on the counter and gestured for them to help themselves. The girls attacked the food with a desperate hunger that broke Robert's heart. They ate quickly, almost without breathing, as if they feared the food would disappear at any moment. He watched in silence, feeling a mixture of pity, curiosity, and something deeper he couldn't identify. "What are your names?" he asked softly. The older girl swallowed the piece of bread she was chewing and answered, "I'm Marina. This is my sister, Laura." Marina and Laura. Beautiful names. "And where are your parents?" Marina looked down, her expression closing off. "It's just our mum, but she's sick. She can't work. We were trying to find something to eat." Robert felt a lump in his throat. "And where is your mother now?" "At home in a boarding house in Queens." "What's her name?" The question came out before he could think. Marina looked at him with suspicion, as if assessing whether she could trust him. After a long moment, she answered, Julianne Foster." The world stopped. Robert felt as if all the air had been sucked out of his lungs. Julianne. It couldn't be a coincidence. These girls were Julianne's daughters. His Julianne. The woman he could never forget, who haunted his dreams and thoughts every day for the past 20 years. And if they were Julianne's daughters, then no. It was impossible. The diagnosis had been clear. He was infertile. There was no way these children could be his. But then why was his heart pounding so hard? Why did he feel like he was looking at a part of himself he never knew existed? "How old are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. 7, Marina replied. "We're turning 8 next month." 7 years old. He did the math quickly. If they were 7, then they were conceived about 8 years ago. 8 years ago, he was still in the early years of his marriage to Patricia, completely focused on building the empire he had today. But he also still thought about Julianne constantly, still wondered where she was, how her life was. Had she tried to contact him? Had Julianne gotten pregnant by him and he never knew? The idea seemed absurd, impossible, but the evidence was there right in front of him, eating bread and cheese as if they hadn't eaten in days. Robert ran a hand over his face, trying to organize his thoughts. He needed to find out the truth. He needed to know if these girls were really his daughters. But how? He couldn't just ask. What if he was wrong? What if it was just a cruel coincidence of fate? "Marina, do you have a picture of your mother with you?" The girl reached into the pocket of her torn pants and pulled out a yellowed, folded photograph. Carefully, she handed it to Robert. He took it, with trembling hands, and unfolded the paper. It was Julianne, older, her face marked by a hard life but still recognizable. She was sitting in a park, with the two little girls in her arms, smiling at the camera with that smile he knew so well. Robert felt tears burn his eyes. She was alive. Julianne was alive, and she was living in conditions he could barely imagine, while he lived in a mansion and had more money than he could spend in several lifetimes. Guilt hit him like a punch to the gut. If these girls were his daughters, and every cell in his body screamed that they were, then he had abandoned them. He had left Julianne alone, pregnant, to face everything by herself while he built his empire and married another woman. He handed the photo back to Marina, who carefully tucked it back into her pocket. The girls had finished eating and were looking at him expectantly, waiting to see what he would do next. Robert made a decision. "You're going to stay here tonight. I'll prepare a room for you. Tomorrow we'll talk about your mother and what we can do to help." Marina frowned, suspicious. "Why? Why are you doing this?" It was a good question, a question he wasn't sure how to answer without sounding like a madman. "Because I knew your mother a long time ago, and because no one should be starving on the streets." It wasn't the whole truth, not by a long shot, but it was all he could say at that moment. Marina studied him for a long moment, her green eyes scanning his face as if trying to read his thoughts. Finally, she nodded. Robert took them to one of the guest rooms on the second floor, a comfortable space with 2 beds and a private bathroom. He showed them where the towels were, gave them clean clothes left over from donations Patricia used to make, and let them shower and get ready. When he left the room, he found Patricia in the hallway, wearing a silk robe and an expression of complete bewilderment on her face. "Robert, what is going on? Who are these children?" He faced her, seeing the woman he had been married to for almost a decade. Patricia was beautiful, elegant, educated, but there was no love there. Nothing left but a convenient partnership that benefited them both socially. And in that moment, looking at her, Robert knew his life was about to change in a way he could never have predicted. "They're the daughters of an old friend who's going through a hard time. I'm going to help them." Patricia crossed her arms, skeptical. "An old friend? And you just brought them into our house without even consulting me?" "They were hungry, Patricia. What did you want me to do?" She sighed, shaking her head. "Sometimes I don't understand you, Robert, but do what you think is best. Just don't expect me to be a part of it." She turned and walked away, the sound of her slippers echoing down the hall. Robert stood there, listening to the sound of the shower coming from the girls' room. His heart was still racing, his mind spinning in 1,000 different directions. He needed to be sure, he needed to get a paternity test. But before that, he needed to find Julianne and get the truth directly from her. Why had she never contacted him? Why had she raised their daughters alone, in such precarious conditions, when she knew where he was, knew he had resources? Robert went back to his private study on the ground floor, closed the door and turned on the computer. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he searched for private investigators, the best money could buy. He wouldn't sleep until he found out the whole truth. While he waited for the system to load, he leaned back in his chair and looked out the window. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets wet and glistening under the streetlights. Outside, the city continued its frantic pace, indifferent to the drama unfolding inside that mansion. Robert thought about all the choices he had made in his life, all the times he had chosen the easier, safer path. He chose the empire over love. He chose his mother's approval over fighting for Julianne. And now, perhaps, the universe was giving him a second chance. A chance to make things right, to be the father he always wanted to be but never thought he could. But first, he needed the truth. And when he found it, when he knew for sure that Marina and Laura were his daughters, nothing in the world would stop him from taking responsibility. Not his mother, not Patricia, not the whole society that would judge him. For the first time in years, Robert felt something like hope growing in his chest. It was painful and frightening, but it was also real. More real than anything he had felt in a very, very long time. He looked at the computer screen, where the names of several investigation agencies appeared. With determination, he began to make calls. The truth was out there, waiting to be discovered. and he would not rest until he found it. Upstairs, in the guest room, Marina and Laura were already lying in the soft beds, wearing clean pajamas for the first time in months. Marina stared at the ceiling, her thoughts confused about this strange man who had taken them in. There was something familiar about him, something she couldn't explain. It was as if she knew him from somewhere, as if there was an invisible connection between them. Laura was already fast asleep, exhausted from the day's journey. But Marina stayed awake, remembering the few things her mother had told her about her father. A man her mother had loved deeply but who had left her when she needed him. A rich, powerful man who chose his family over them. Could that man, Mr. Anderson, as the security guard called him, be him? The idea seemed absurd, but Marina couldn't get it out of her head. There was something in the way he looked at her and Laura, as if he was seeing ghosts. There was recognition in those eyes and maybe even pain. Marina closed her eyes, deciding she would think about it tomorrow. For now, she and Laura were safe, fed, and clean. It was more than they had had in a long time. And maybe, just maybe, this night marked, the beginning of something new for them. As the silence of the night enveloped the mansion, 3 lives were about to intertwine in ways none of them could have predicted. The past and the present collided on that rainy May night, and nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 2. The sun had not yet risen when Robert woke up, if he had even really slept. He had tossed and turned all night, his mind working non-stop, processing the possibilities, the probabilities, the implications of this impossible discovery. Marina and Laura. The names echoed in his head like a mantra. His daughters. They could be his daughters. He got out of the king-size bed where he had been sleeping alone for months, ever since Patricia decided she preferred the guest room to sharing the same space with him. The physical separation was just a reflection of the emotional separation that had existed for years. They were strangers living under the same roof, keeping up appearances for the outside world, while their inner lives followed completely opposite paths. Robert took a quick shower, put on a grey Armani suit, and went down to the kitchen before the staff even arrived. The house was completely silent. Only the distant sound of birds beginning their morning song broke the stillness. He made coffee, more out of habit than desire, and sat at the dining table that could seat 12, but rarely saw more than 2. His mind went back to the girls. He needed to act carefully to find out the truth without causing more pain than had already been caused. If they were really his daughters, and his heart already knew they were, even if his head still resisted, then he had lost 7 years. 7 years of first words, first steps, first laughs. 7 years of birthdays, Christmases, moments he could never get back. The pain of that realization was almost unbearable. He picked up his phone and dialed the number he had saved the night before. 3 rings later, a deep, professional voice answered. "Hello, Charles Miller speaking." "Charles, this is Robert Anderson. Sorry to call so early, but I need your services urgently." Charles Miller was the best private investigator in New York, discreet and efficient. Robert had used his services a few times for corporate matters, competitor investigations, background checks on potential partners, but never for something so personal, so painfully intimate as this. "No problem, Mr. Anderson, I'm at your service. What do you need?" Robert took a deep breath before answering, organizing his thoughts. "I need you to find someone for me, a woman named Julianne Foster. She should be around 42, 43 years old. The last information I have is that she's living in a boarding house in Queens. She has twin daughters, Marina and Laura, 7 years old. I need everything. Exact address, financial situation, history of the last few years, everything you can find." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "Understood. Any specific deadline?" "As soon as possible. It's urgent. And Charles, I need total discretion in this case. Absolute." "You can count on me, Mr. Anderson. I'll be in touch as soon as I have something." Robert hung up and stared at the phone screen, as if it could give him the answers he was looking for. He knew Charles was good, fast. He would probably have results by the end of the day. And then what? What would he do with that information? How would he approach Julianne after so many years after abandoning Her in the most cowardly way possible? Light footsteps on the stairs pulled him from his thoughts. Robert turned his head and saw Marina coming down cautiously, holding Laura's hand. The two were still wearing the borrowed pajamas that were too big for their thin bodies. Their hair, now clean, fell over their shoulders in light brown waves. Marina saw Robert and stopped, protective, placing herself in front of her sister. "Good morning," Robert said, trying to sound as welcoming as possible. "Did you sleep well?" Marina nodded slowly, still suspicious. "Yes, sir. The bed was very comfortable." "Good. Are you hungry? I can make you some breakfast." Laura's eyes lit up, but she looked to Marina for approval. The older sister hesitated for just a second before agreeing. "Yes, please." Robert got up and started preparing breakfast. He took eggs from the fridge, bread, butter, fresh fruit, orange juice. As he scrambled the eggs in the pan, he watched the girls out of the corner of his eye. They sat at the table, side by side, whispering to each other. Marina maintained a rigid, alert posture, while Laura seemed more relaxed but still apprehensive. When breakfast was ready, Robert served the girls carefully. They ate with the same desperate appetite as the night before, but this time trying to restrain themselves, chewing slowly, using the silverware with an etiquette that surprised Robert. Someone, probably Julianne, had taught these children good manners despite all the difficulties. After they finished, Robert sat across from them and took a deep breath. He needed to ask questions, needed to know more, but he didn't want to scare them or make them feel interrogated. "Girls," he said softly, "I'd like to talk to you a little about your mother. Is that okay?" Marina studied him with those piercing green eyes, so much like Julianne's that it hurt to look at them. "Why? Why do you want to know about our mom?" It was a fair question, and Robert didn't have an answer he could give at that moment. "Because, as I said yesterday, I knew your mother a long time ago, and I'm worried about you. I want to help." Marina tilted her head, thoughtful. "When did you know our mom?" "More than 20 years ago, at university. We were friends." "Just friends?" The question was asked with a maturity that didn't match her. 7 years. Robert swallowed hard. "We were very good friends," he answered carefully. Marina continued to stare at him, as if she could see right through him. Finally, she stopped asking questions and started talking. "Our mom got sick a few months ago. She worked in a sewing factory making clothes, but then she started having a lot of pain, getting very tired. The doctors said she needs expensive medicine, treatment, but we don't have the money." Robert felt his heart tighten. "What kind of illness?" Marina looked down. "We don't really know. She doesn't like to talk about it. Says she doesn't want us to worry. But I heard the doctors talking. There's something with her heart that isn't working right. Something with her heart." Robert closed his eyes briefly, feeling the guilt and pain mix in his chest. Julianne was sick, struggling while he lived in his mansion, swimming in money he didn't even know how to spend. "And you were taking care of her by yourselves?" "We try," Marina answered, her voice choked. "Laura helps me, but the food is running out. The rent is late. The landlady said she's going to kick us out if we don't pay soon. That's why we went out to try and get something." Robert had to control himself to keep the tears from falling. These children, his children, had been forced to become adults too soon, carrying responsibilities that shouldn't be theirs, and all because he had been weak, because he had given in to his mother's pressure instead of fighting for what he loved. "You won't have to worry about that anymore," he said firmly. "I'll take care of everything. I'll take care of you and your mother." Marina looked up, surprised and suspicious at the same time. "Why? Why would you do that for strangers?" "Because you're not strangers to me, and because it's the right thing to do." It was an insufficient answer, he knew, but it was all he could give at that moment, until he was sure, until he could tell the whole truth. Marina stared at him for a few more seconds before nodding slowly, accepting his words for the time being. Robert's phone rang, breaking the moment. He excused himself and answered. It was Charles. "Mr. Anderson, I have some preliminary information. The woman you're looking for is registered at a boarding house in Queens on Irvington Street, number 347. I paid some of her overdue bills with a contact I have there, but there's something else I need to tell you in person. Can I come by in an hour? Yes, you can. Thank you, Charles. Robert hung up and looked at the girls. I'm going to take you back to your mother today, but first, I want to make sure she's okay, that you'll all be okay. All right? The girls agreed, and Robert called one of the staff who had arrived to stay with them while he prepared for his meeting with Charles. He went up to his office and stood by the window, watching the city wake up, millions of people starting another day of their lives, completely oblivious to the fact that Robert Anderson's world had been turned upside down. Exactly 1 hour later, Charles Miller was announced by the security guard. Robert received him in the study, closing the door behind them. Charles was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a serious expression. He carried a leather briefcase that he placed on the desk. Mr. Anderson, I found everything you asked for, but I must warn you that some of this information may be difficult to hear. Robert sat down, bracing himself. Go on. Charles opened the briefcase and began to read. Julianne Foster, 43 years old. Architect, graduate of Columbia University, but never practiced. For the past 20 years, she has worked various low-paying jobs, waitress, salesperson, seamstress, currently unemployed due to a heart condition diagnosed 6 months ago. She needs heart surgery, but lacks the funds for the procedure. She's on a public health waiting list, but the line is long. Charles paused, looking at Robert before continuing. Her daughters, Marina and Laura Foster, were born on June 23, 2018. The father is not listed on the birth certificate, but, Mr. Anderson, I did some deeper research and found something interesting. Julianne became pregnant in September of 2017, approximately 1 month before you married Mrs. Patricia. Robert felt as if he had been punched in the gut. 1 month before, she was pregnant with his child while he was preparing to marry another woman. My God. There's more, Charles continued. I found records that Julianne tried to contact you at the time. She called your company, several times sent letters, but they were all intercepted. From what I could gather, your mother, Mrs. Margaret Anderson, became aware of the pregnancy and took measures to ensure you never found out. The room began to spin. Robert leaned on the desk, trying to breathe. His mother, his damned mother, knew. She knew he had daughters and hid it from him. She stole 7 years with his own children from him. The rage he felt at that moment was something he had never experienced before, a blind, devastating fury. Are you sure about this? He asked in a hoarse voice. Charles nodded gravely. I obtained copies of the letters that were sent to your company and never reached you. They're here. He pushed an envelope across the desk. And there's one more thing. I did an analysis based on photos I obtained of a young Julianne and the girls. The genetic resemblances are undeniable. The girls have features that correspond to both Julianne and you. Marina's eyes are identical to her mother's, but the shape of her face, the jawline, are yours. Laura has your nose, your lips. I can't say with 100% certainty without a DNA test, but in my experience these children are your daughters. Robert picked up the envelope with trembling hands and opened it. Inside were several letters, all in Julianne's delicate handwriting. He began to read the first one, dated October 2017. Robert, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Please call me as soon as you get this letter. Julianne. The second was from November. Robert, I've tried calling several times, but your secretary says you're always busy. I really need to talk to you. I'm pregnant. The baby is yours. Please get in touch. The following letters were increasingly desperate, begging for a response, for any sign that he had received the messages. The last one was from January 2018, just a few months before the girls were born. Robert, I don't know what else to do. I've tried every way to reach you, but it seems there's a wall between us. I'm having twins, our daughters. I know you got married and maybe it's for the best, but I needed you to know you're going to be a father. If you want to be a part of their lives, I'll be waiting. If you don't, I'll understand and raise our girls on my own. I just wanted you to have the choice I never did. With love, Julianne. Robert let the letter fall onto the desk, unable to hold it any longer. The tears he had been holding back finally fell, streaming silently down his face. Julianne had tried. She tried to tell him, tried to give him the chance to be there. And his mother, that manipulative, cruel woman, had stolen that from him. She had stolen his chance to be there when his daughters were born, when they took their first steps, when they spoke their first words. "I have to go to her," Robert said, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I have to see Julianne, now." "Mr. Anderson," Charles hesitated. "Given her condition, it might be better to take the girls first. Julianne is very weak. It could be a shock to see you after all these years." "I don't care. She deserves to know the truth. She deserves to know I never got her letters, that I never knew." He stood up, determined. "I'm going to get the girls, and we're going there now." Charles nodded and stood up as, "Well, do you want me to come with you?" "No, thank you. This is something I need to do alone. But Charles," he paused before opening the door, "thank you for everything." "At your service, Mr. Anderson." Robert went down the stairs quickly, finding Marina and Laura watching television in the living room. They looked at him in surprise when he appeared, noticing the urgency in his movements. "Girls, we're going to see your mother now. Get ready." They didn't need to be told twice. In a few minutes they were in the car, Robert driving through the city with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. The morning traffic was heavy, but he navigated the streets with determination, each minute feeling like an eternity. Marina sat in the back seat, holding Laura's hand, looking out the window as they left the Upper East Side and headed towards Queens. The landscape changed gradually, the luxurious buildings giving way to simpler constructions, the tree-lined streets turning into busy, noisy avenues. When they finally arrived in the neighborhood, Robert parked in front of an old 3-story building with peeling paint and barred windows. A faded sign read, "St. Mary's Boarding House." His heart was racing, beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. Marina got out of the car and ran to the entrance, Laura right behind her. Robert followed them, climbing the narrow, dimly lit stairs to the second floor. Marina stopped in front of a door marked with the number 12 and knocked softly. "Mum, it's us." A weak voice answered from inside. "Marina, Laura, thank God. Come in." Marina opened the door and went in, Robert hesitating for a moment before following them. The room was small, barely fitting 2 single beds and an old wardrobe. The only window let in a dim light, and there, lying on one of the beds, was Julianne. Robert stopped at the door, unable to move. 20 years. It had been 20 years since he last saw her, but he would have recognized her anywhere. She was thinner, much thinner, with pale skin and deep dark circles under her eyes. But it was her, his Julianne, and then their eyes met. Julianne froze completely, her eyes widening in shock and disbelief. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She just stared at him as if she were seeing a ghost, as if the past had materialized right in front of her. "Robert," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible, "is it really you?" Robert took a step forward, his voice choked. "It's me. Julianne, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." Marina and Laura looked from one to the other, confused, feeling the tension in the air but not fully understanding what was happening. Julianne tried to sit up, but she was too weak. Robert rushed to help her, carefully holding her arm. Her touch, even after all this time, still made his heart race. "What are you doing here?" Julianne asked, tears starting to stream down her face. "After all these years, what are you doing here?" "The girls. I found the girls last night, at the gate of my house. They were looking for food." Julianne covered her face with her hands, sobbing. "Oh God, my girls, I tried, Robert. I tried to take care of them, but I couldn't. I failed them." "No," Robert knelt beside the bed, holding her hands. "You didn't fail. You're the strongest, bravest woman I know. You raised these beautiful girls on your own, gave them love and education even when you had nothing. You're a hero." Julianne shook her head, crying harder. "I tried to tell you, Robert. When I found out I was pregnant, I tried to let you know. I called so many times, sent letters, but you never answered. I thought you didn't want to know that you had moved on with your life." "I never got your letters," Robert said urgently. "My mother. It was my mother. She intercepted everything. I never knew, Julianne. I swear I never knew. If I had known, I would have come back. I would have been there. For you, for our daughters." "Our daughters." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Marina, who had been listening to everything, took a step forward. "Are you our father?" she asked in a trembling voice. "Are you our dad?" Robert turned to her, seeing his daughters for the first time through the eyes of a father. "Yes," he said, his voice full of emotion. "Yes, Marina. I'm your father, and Laura's too, and I'm so sorry I wasn't here from the beginning. But I promise I'll make up for all the lost time." Marina stood, still processing the information. Then she started to cry, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. Laura, still not fully understanding but feeling the emotion in the room, also began to cry. Robert opened his arms, and the two girls ran to him, throwing themselves into his embrace. He held them tightly, feeling the weight and warmth of his own daughters for the first time. Julianne watched the scene, crying, a mixture of pain and relief on her face. After so long fighting alone, she was no longer alone. Robert looked at her over the girls' heads. "I'm going to take care of you," he said. "All three of you. I'll take care of the surgery, of everything you need. You'll never have to struggle again." Julianne wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the pride that had kept her going all these years, but she was too tired to fight, too weak to refuse. She just nodded, accepting the help she had always needed, but was too proud and hurt to ask for. Robert gently separated from the girls and turned his attention back to Julianne. "I'm going to call the best cardiologist in New York right now. You're going to get the treatment you need, today if possible." "Robert," Julianne held his hand with what little strength she had, "you're married. You have your life. You can't just show up after 20 years and turn everything upside down." "My life?" Robert laughed bitterly. "What life, Julianne? An empty marriage with a woman who barely speaks to me? A huge mansion where I feel completely alone? Money that means nothing? That's not a life. That's just existing. You and the girls, you are my life. You always were. I was just too foolish to realize it in time." Julianne closed her eyes, fresh tears streaming. "I loved you so much, Robert, so much it hurt. When you broke up with me, I thought I was going to die, and when I found out I was pregnant, I wanted to hate you. I wanted to tear you out of my heart. But I couldn't. Every time I looked at the girls, I saw you in them, and I couldn't hate something that gave me the two greatest blessings of my life." Robert felt his heart break. He gently held her face, forcing her to look at him. "I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. I married Patricia because it was expected, because my mother demanded it, because I was too cowardly to fight. But not a single day went by that I didn't think of you, that I didn't regret letting you go." Marina and Laura watched their parents, finally understanding the depth of the history between them. Marina wiped her tears and asked, "Why didn't Grandma want you to be together?" Robert turned to his daughter, seeing in her the same sharp intelligence Julianne always had. "Because my mother thought she knew what was best for me. She thought money and status were more important than love, and I, like a fool, believed her." "Does she know about us?" Marina asked. "Does your mother know we exist?" The anger rose in Robert's chest again. "She knows. She always knew, and she hid it from me. But that's going to change. She's going to have to face the consequences of what she did." Robert took out his phone and made a few quick calls. First to his personal physician, Dr. Paul H. Stevens, one of the best cardiologists in the country. He explained the situation urgently, and the doctor agreed to come to the boarding house immediately to evaluate Julianne. Then he called a private ambulance, ensuring she would be transferred to Mount Sinai Hospital as soon as the doctor gave the go-ahead. While they waited, Robert stayed by Julianne's bed, holding her hand. The girls sat on the other side, one on each side of their mother. For the first time in 7 years, that family was complete. Broken, bruised, but complete. "What's going to happen now?" Julianne asked softly. "With your wife, your family, everything?" Robert sighed. "I'm going to divorce Patricia. I should have done it, years ago. As for my mother, she'll either have to accept you in my life or lose her son. I'm not letting her separate us again. And the girls. The girls will live with me, with us, when you're better. I'll give them everything they deserve, everything they should have had from the beginning. School, clothes, a real home, a family." Julianne squeezed his hand. They don't need expensive things, Robert. They need love, presence, a father. I know, and I'm going to give them that. I'm going to be the father I should have been from the start. Half an hour later, Dr. Stevens arrived. He was a tall man in his 60s, with completely white hair and a kind expression. He greeted Robert quickly before turning his attention to Julianne. Robert and the girls left the room to give them privacy while the doctor examined the patient. They stood in the narrow hallway of the boarding house, Robert looking at the peeling walls and worn floor. To think that his daughters grew up here in these conditions while he lived in luxury was a guilt he would carry forever. Marina approached him, touching his arm shyly. "Are you really going to take care of us?" Robert knelt down to her level, looking directly into her eyes. "Yes, I promise. I know I wasn't there before, and I know I can't change that. But from now on, I will be present for every moment. Every birthday, every school play, every important moment and every ordinary one. You are my daughters, and I will spend the rest of my life making up for the time we lost." Marina hugged him tightly, and Robert felt his heart explode with love. Laura joined the hug too, and there, in that humble hallway, Robert finally felt like he was home. 15 minutes later, Dr. Stevens came out of the room with a serious expression. Robert stood up immediately, his heart tight. "Is it bad?" he asked. "It's serious, but treatable," the doctor replied. "She has advanced dilated cardiomyopathy. Her heart is only functioning at 40% capacity. She needs urgent surgery to implant a pacemaker and possibly an artificial valve. Without treatment, she has a few months to live. With the proper treatment, she can live for many more years." Robert felt his legs go weak. "Then we'll do the surgery. Today, if possible. I'll admit her to Mount Sinai today and prepare the team. The surgery can be done early tomorrow morning. She's very weak, so she needs immediate care. Do whatever is necessary. Money is no object." The doctor nodded. "The ambulance should be here in 10 minutes. I'll accompany her to the hospital." When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics carefully placed Julianne on a stretcher. She was pale but conscious, holding Robert's hand as she was carried down the stairs. The girls followed behind, scared but trying to be brave. At the hospital, Julianne was immediately taken to a private suite on the 10th floor. The change from the miserable room at the boarding house to this luxurious environment was shocking. An electric bed, a flat-screen TV, a private bathroom with a bathtub, even a beautiful view of the city. Marina and Laura looked at everything with wide eyes, having never seen anything like it. A nurse came to connect Julianne to the monitors and started administering medication. Robert stayed by her side the whole time, not letting go of her hand. When they were finally alone again with the girls asleep on the sofa bed nearby, Julianne looked at him. "This all feels like a dream," she whispered. "I'm afraid to wake up and find out none of this is real." "It's real," Robert assured her, "and I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here when you wake up from surgery tomorrow, and I'll be here every day after that. That's a promise." Julianne closed her eyes, finally allowing herself to relax. For the first time in years, she felt safe. She was no longer alone in the fight. Robert was back, and despite all the lost time, despite all the pain, maybe there was still hope for them. Robert stayed awake all night, watching Julianne sleep, watching his daughters sleep. His mind was already working on the next steps. He would need to talk to Patricia, start the divorce proceedings. He would need to confront his mother, something he dreaded but knew was necessary. He would need to enroll the girls in a good school, buy them clothes, arrange for documents. But more important than all of that, he would need to learn how to be a father. He would need to build a relationship with Marina and Laura, earn their trust, show them they could count on him. It wouldn't be easy. They had spent their whole lives without him, developed their own dynamic, a way of surviving together. He would be an intruder, at least at first. But he was determined. He had wasted 20 years of his life living according to others' expectations. Now it was time to live on his own terms, to fight for what really mattered. In that hospital room, as the city slept outside, Robert Anderson finally found what he had been searching for his whole life. It wasn't success, it wasn't money, it wasn't power, it was love. Real, complicated, Imperfect love, but real, and he wouldn't let that love slip away again, no matter the price he had to pay. Chapter 3. The morning arrived, bringing with it a palpable tension. Robert hadn't slept at all. He had spent the entire night on the sofa next to Julianne's bed, watching the heart monitor trace its irregular rhythm. The girls woke up early, frightened by the hospital environment, but Marina quickly took on her role as the older sister, reassuring Laura and explaining that they were there to help their mother. Julianne was awake but quiet, her green eyes fixed on the white ceiling of the room. Robert could see the fear in her, even though she tried to hide it from her daughters. The surgery was scheduled for 7 in the morning, and it was already 6:15. Soon the medical team would come for her. Robert approached and held her hand. "Everything's going to be all right," he whispered. "Dr. Stevens is the best. You're going to get through this, and we'll have many years ahead of us." Julianne turned her face to him, and for the first time since they had reunited, she smiled. A small, fragile, but genuine smile. "Thank you, Robert, for being here, for coming back. I should have never left." Before they could continue their conversation, the door opened, and 2 nurses entered with a gurney. It was time. Marina and Laura immediately stood up, rushing to their mother's side. Julianne hugged them both with all the strength she could muster. "Be strong, my girls," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Mommy's going to be fine, and when I come back, we're going to start a new life, the 3 of us, and now you have a father who loves you." The girls cried softly, holding their mother's hands until the very last second. Robert had to gently pull them away when it was time for Julianne to be transferred to the gurney. He walked with her to the doors of the surgical center, where he had to stop. Dr. Stevens was there, already in his scrubs, and he nodded encouragingly. "Take care of her," Robert said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Please. I'll do my best." And then the doors closed, and Julianne disappeared behind them. Robert stood there for a long moment, staring at those stainless steel double doors as if he could will himself through them. Finally, Marina touched his arm. "Daddy, is she going to be okay?" The word Daddy hit him like a lightning bolt. It was the first time one of the girls had called him that. He knelt and hugged them both. "She's going to be okay, she has to be." They returned to the waiting room, a sterile environment with plastic chairs and old magazines. Robert tried to distract the girls, telling them stories about when he and Julianne were young, about the university, about the dreams they had. It was painful and comforting at the same time to revisit those memories. 2 hours passed, then 3. Robert paced back and forth, unable to stay still. His phone rang several times. Calls from Patricia, from his secretary, from business partners. He ignored them all. Nothing else mattered at that moment but Julianne and the girls. In the 4th hour of waiting, his phone rang again. This time it was a number he knew very well, a number that used to make his stomach churn with anxiety. His mother, Margaret Anderson. Robert hesitated, looking at the screen. Part of him wanted to ignore it, but another part, the furious part that had been growing since he discovered the truth, wanted to confront her. He answered. "Hello." "Robert, finally." Margaret's voice was as cold and controlled as ever. "Where are you? Patricia called me, hysterical, saying you didn't come home and aren't answering her calls. What is going on?" "I'm at the hospital." "The hospital?" There was a pause. "Are you all right? What happened?" "It's not me. It's Julianne." Another silence, this one longer. When Margaret spoke again, her voice was even colder. "Julianne Foster." "Yes, my Julianne. The woman you forced me to abandon 20 years ago. The mother of my daughters. The daughters you hid from me." "Robert, I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," Robert shouted, making Marina and Laura look up, startled. "I know everything. I know she tried to tell me about the pregnancy. I know you intercepted the letters, the calls. You stole 7 years with my daughters from me. 7 years." "Robert, you need to understand," Margaret began, her voice taking on that condescending tone he hated. "That woman wasn't right for you. She was just trying to take advantage of our family. I did what was best for you." "Best for me?" Robert laughed bitterly. "You condemned me to a life of unhappiness. You married me off to a woman I don't love. You separated me from my own children. How could that possibly be what's best for me? You have an empire to run, Robert. Responsibilities. You can't just throw it all away for some old flame and 2 children that— Be careful, Robert interrupted, his voice dangerously low. Be very careful what you're about to say about my daughters. Margaret took a deep breath. Where is this going, Robert? Are you going to divorce Patricia? Are you going to bring these people into our family cause a scandal? Yes, Robert replied without hesitation. I am going to divorce Patricia. And Marina and Laura are not these people. They are my daughters, your granddaughters. And if you can't accept that, then maybe it's best you're no longer a part of my life. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my entire life. You can choose. Either you accept Julianne and the girls, or you lose me. I will not negotiate on this. Robert, you're being irrational. Think of the company, our reputation, everything we've built. I've thought about that my whole life. I spent 20 years living up to your expectations, and you know what it got me? Nothing. Absolutely nothing worthwhile. But now I have something real. I have a real family, and I'm not going to let you destroy that again. He hung up before she could reply, his hands shaking with rage and pure adrenaline. Marina approached cautiously, her eyes wide with concern. Are you okay? Robert took a deep breath, trying to calm himself and control the turbulent emotions. Yes, I am. I'm sorry you had to hear that. I didn't want you to witness that conversation. Was it about us? Marina asked in a small voice. Does Grandma not want to meet us? Robert knelt in front of her, holding her shoulders gently but firmly. Listen to me very carefully, Marina. Laura. My mother is a very complicated, extremely controlling woman. She was raised in a very different time, in a world with rigid, outdated values. She believes in things that make no sense, like money and a family name being more important than love and character. But that is not your fault in any way, and it has absolutely nothing to do with who you are as people. You are perfect, beautiful, intelligent, and brave. Anyone with a shred of common sense and a heart would be deeply honored and happy to know you and be a part of your lives. But she doesn't want to, Marina insisted, tears welling in her eyes. She doesn't even know us, and she already dislikes us. Maybe not right now, Robert admitted honestly. But that is her serious problem, not yours. It's a flaw in her character. It has nothing to do with you, and regardless of what she decides to do, whether she'll try to accept us or continue being stubborn and bitter, I will be here with you. I choose you over anyone else. I will always choose you, without hesitation. What if she makes you choose? Marina asked. Between her and us? Then I choose you without a second thought, Robert replied immediately. She's had decades to learn how to truly love and chose not to. But you are my daughters, my blood, my heart. And nothing and no one will ever separate us again. I solemnly promise you that. Marina hugged him tightly, her small body trembling slightly with contained emotions. Laura joined the hug, and Robert felt tears burn his eyes again for the umpteenth time. He had cried more in the last 48 hours than in his entire adult life. But they weren't just tears of sadness or regret. They were also tears of release, of finally having the courage to feel everything deeply, to allow himself to be vulnerable, to be human and imperfect. Another long, anxious hour passed, each minute feeling like an eternity, before Dr. Stevens finally appeared at the waiting room doors. He was still wearing his stained green scrubs, his mask hanging around his neck, but his face wore a tired but genuine smile. Robert jumped to his feet, his heart racing. How is she? Please, tell me she's okay. The doctor's smile widened reassuringly. The surgery was a complete success, Mr. Anderson. We were able to implant the pacemaker precisely and repair the damaged heart valve. She's in recovery now, still under anesthesia. She'll need a few days in the hospital for observation and then complete rest for at least 6 weeks. But the prognosis is excellent. With proper medical care, regular medication, and follow-ups, she can live a completely normal and healthy life for many, many years. Robert felt his knees nearly buckle with pure relief, as if a massive weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Thank you, Dr. Stevens. Thank you so, so much. I don't have the words to express my gratitude. It's my job and my calling, the doctor replied kindly. She should wake up from the anesthesia in a few hours. You can see her as soon as she's transferred back to her room. She'll be disoriented at first, that's normal, but she'll soon be wide awake and conscious. When Julianne was finally back in her room, still drowsy from the anesthesia but alive and stable, Robert and the girls were there waiting. She slowly opened her eyes and smiled when she saw them. "Hi," she whispered hoarsely. "Hi," Robert replied, holding her hand. "Welcome back." The girls approached the bed, careful not to touch the wires and tubes, but needing to be close to their mother. Julianne reached out her free hand and touched each of their faces. "My beautiful girls, Mommy's okay. Everything is going to be okay now." And for the first time in a long time, those words felt true. The following days were a blur of the hospital, lawyers, and profound changes. Robert hired the best family law attorneys in New York to handle his divorce from Patricia. She didn't fight it. In fact, she seemed almost relieved. Their marriage had been dead for years, they both knew it. It was just a matter of formalizing the end of something that no longer existed. They met only once, in Robert's office, to sign the initial papers. Patricia entered, elegant as always, wearing a beige Chanel suit and high heels that echoed on the marble floor. She sat across the desk from him and faced him with a neutral, almost indifferent expression. "So this is how it ends," she said, devoid of emotion. "Almost a decade of marriage, and you trade me for an old flame and 2 children you barely know." Robert sighed, tired of explanations. "It's not about trading, Patricia. It's about finally being honest. We both know this marriage was over a long time ago. We're just making official what has been true for years." She didn't argue because there was nothing to argue about. The truth was undeniable. "Do you love her? This Julianne?" "I always have. I never stopped." Patricia gave a humorless laugh, a dry, bitter sound. "At least you're honest now." She took the Mont Blanc pen he offered and began signing the documents with precise mechanical movements. "I'll accept the terms of the settlement. The house in the Hamptons, the apartment in Soho, and the proposed alimony. I won't make this difficult. But Robert," she paused and looked at him with an intensity he didn't expect. "I hope it's worth it. I hope this grand love story you're living isn't just some romantic fantasy that will crumble. When reality hits, it's not a fantasy, it's real. More real than anything I've ever known." She finished signing the last of the papers and stood up, smoothing her suit skirt with automatic gestures. "Good luck, Robert. You're going to need it." And then she left, her heels echoing down the hallway until they disappeared completely. After she was gone, Robert sat in silence for a long time, staring at the signed papers on his desk. Part of him felt guilty. Patricia wasn't a bad person. She was never cruel or manipulative. She was just the wrong person, chosen for the wrong reasons. She deserved someone who would truly love her, with passion and devotion, just as he deserved to be with the one he had always loved from the very first moment. Meanwhile, the girls were adjusting to the new reality unfolding before them like a completely different and sometimes frightening world. Robert enrolled them in the Dalton School, one of the best and most respected private schools in New York, nationally recognized for its academic excellence. On the first day of school, Marina squeezed Robert's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. She was terrified, but tried not to show it for Laura's sake. "It's going to be okay," Robert whispered, kneeling to her height at the school gate. "You are smart, strong, special. These kids will be lucky to know you, and if anyone is mean to you, I want you to tell me immediately. Okay?" Marina nodded, swallowing her fear with difficulty. "What if they notice we're different, that we came from a poor place?" "There's nothing wrong with where you came from. It shows how brave and resilient you are. You've survived things these spoiled kids can't even imagine. That's strength, not weakness. Walk with your head held high." The first few weeks were challenging in ways Robert hadn't anticipated. Marina would come home quiet and withdrawn, clearly struggling to fit into such a different environment. The other children came from families that had been wealthy for generations. They talked about international trips, resort vacations, designer clothes. Marina felt like she was wearing clothes that didn't fit, trying to be someone she wasn't. One night, Robert found her crying in her room, hidden under the covers. His heart broke. "What happened, sweetheart?" "I can't do it," Marina sobbed. "I don't belong there." The girls laughed at me today because I didn't know who that famous American singer they all love is. They can tell I'm different, that I'm not like them. Robert sat on the bed and pulled Marina into a tight hug. "Listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. You don't have to be like them. You are unique, special in your own way. Yes, you've had a different, harder life, but that has given you qualities these girls will never have. Courage, empathy, inner strength. You took care of your sick mother and your sister when you were only 7 years old. You are a hero, Marina, a true hero. And if those girls can't see that, then they don't deserve your friendship." "But I wanted to have friends," Marina confessed. "I wanted to be normal." "You will have friends," Robert promised. "The right ones, the ones who will value you for who you really are. It just takes time. And in the meantime, you have Laura, you have your mom, and you have me. We are your family, and we will always be here." Gradually, things began to improve. Marina found a girl in her class, Sophia, who was also different from the others. Sophia had been adopted as a baby and understood what it felt like to be an outsider. The two became inseparable friends. Laura, being naturally more sociable and carefree, adapted more quickly, making friends easily with her drawings that charmed everyone. Robert bought them new, perfectly fitted uniforms, imported ergonomic backpacks, a complete set of the best school supplies, anything that could make things easier. But more important than all the material things in the world, he spent quality time with them. Real, present, attentive time. He took them to Central Park on weekends to ride bikes on the shaded paths, to the cinema to watch animated movies that made them laugh, to the zoo where Laura was completely enchanted by the pink flamingos and playful monkeys. He talked with them during every family dinner, unhurriedly, learning about their musical tastes, their deepest fears that woke them at night, their most impossible secret dreams, their genuine hopes for a future that now seemed bright. Marina was naturally more reserved and introspective, still processing the avalanche of drastic changes that had completely transformed their lives in a matter of a few intense days. She was protective of her sister by developed instinct and wary of new situations from painful experience, traits she had developed out of the harsh necessity of surviving on dangerous streets. Robert realized with pain that she had been cruelly forced to grow up too fast, to take on heavy adult responsibilities that should never, under normal circumstances, have been placed on the fragile shoulders of a child. He tried with infinite patience, slowly and very carefully, to give her explicit permission to just be a carefree child again. Laura was more open, easier to approach, with a generous heart that seemed incapable of holding a grudge. She loved to draw, spending hours creating colorful worlds on paper. Robert bought her every art supply he could find: professional colored pencils, watercolor paints, special papers, easels, everything. He discovered she had an extraordinary natural talent, undoubtedly inherited from Julianne. Laura's drawings began to adorn the walls of the mansion, bringing color, life, and joy to a space that had always been too big and too cold. A week after the surgery, Julianne was finally discharged from the hospital. Robert took her not to the miserable boarding house in Queens, but directly to his home on the Upper East Side. She protested weakly but persistently, saying it wasn't appropriate, that people would talk, that it could cause problems. But Robert was absolutely firm. "Let them say whatever they want," he said with determination. "You and the girls are my family, and family stays together no matter what others think or say." Julianne settled into one of the ground floor rooms, specially prepared for her so she wouldn't have to climb stairs during the first months of her recovery. It was a spacious, bright room with a privileged view of the lush garden, with glass doors that opened directly onto the green lawn, 1,000 times better than the cramped, damp cubicle at the boarding house. The girls had their own rooms on the second floor, each carefully decorated according to their tastes and personalities. Marina chose shades of aqua and navy blue, with light wood shelves filled with books Robert had bought. Laura wanted light pink and lavender, with a huge desk specially designed for her art projects, and organized drawers for all her supplies. For the first time in their young lives, they had a real home, a safe, stable, and welcoming place where they didn't have to worry about food on the table, about late rent, about anything other than just being children who deserved to be happy. But not everything was easy or simple. There were difficult moments, complicated conversations that needed to happen. One evening, 2 weeks after they moved into the mansion, Marina came into Robert's study. He was working on some administrative papers, trying to catch up on business after weeks of absence. "Can I talk to you?" she asked shyly, standing at the door. "Of course, always," Robert replied immediately. He closed his laptop and gave her his full attention, something he was learning to do. "What is it, sweetheart?" Marina sat in the leather chair opposite the desk, nervously fiddling with her hands in her lap. "I've been thinking about some things. Why didn't you come sooner? I mean, Mom was sick for months. We were struggling for a long time, years actually. If you loved us as much as you say you do, why did it take you so long to find us?" It was a fair, legitimate, and painful question. Robert took a deep breath, preparing to be completely honest. "Because I didn't know you existed, Marina. I know that doesn't change anything, doesn't make things better, doesn't erase the suffering you went through. But I swear to you, on my life, if I had known you existed, I would have moved heaven and earth, mountains and oceans to get to you. My mother hid everything from me. She intercepted all of your mother's desperate attempts to tell me about the pregnancy, about you. But you didn't try to look for Mom, after you broke up with her so coldly." "I did try," Robert admitted, feeling the shame burn. "But not hard enough. Not with the determination I should have had. I should have insisted more. I should have fought my mother with all my strength. I should have been much braver. I was a coward, Marina, weak and cowardly, and the three of you paid the terrible price for my cowardice. I am so sorry, more sorry than I can express in words, more than any apology could ever convey." Marina was quiet for a long moment, her green eyes studying his face intently, searching for signs of lies or falsehood. Finally, she asked the question that really mattered. "And now, are you going to stay? With us? Or when things get hard, when the novelty wears off and reality sets in, are you going to leave again like you did with Mom?" The question cut Robert like a sharp knife to the chest, but he understood perfectly. She was testing him, wanting assurances he knew he couldn't give with words alone. Only his actions over time would prove his words. "Look, Marina, I can't give you a magical answer that will make you trust me instantly. Trust isn't bought or declared. It's built brick by brick with time and consistent actions. All I can say, and promise with all my heart, is that I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here tomorrow and the day after and next year and in 10 years and forever. I'll be here when you need help with your homework, when you have your first heartbreak, when you graduate from high school and college, when you get married, when you have your own children who will be my grandchildren. I will be here for absolutely everything. And slowly, with patience and dedication, I hope you will truly believe that." Marina studied him with those green eyes so like Julianne's, so piercing, and wise for such a young girl. Then very slowly she nodded. "Okay, I'll give you a chance, but you have to prove it with actions, not just pretty words." "I will prove it, I solemnly promise." She got up from the chair to leave, but paused at the door, turning back. "Dad?" "Yes, honey." "Thank you. For taking care of Mom when she needed it most, for bringing us here and giving us safety. I know I'm still processing everything that happened so fast, but I want you to know that I'm genuinely grateful for everything." Robert felt a tight knot in his throat, pure emotion flooding his chest. "You never have to thank me. It's my duty as your father and my pleasure as someone who loves you." After Marina left, Robert sat there in the growing darkness of the study, only the lamplight faintly illuminating the desk. He reflected deeply on everything. He had a long journey ahead, he knew that. Making up for 20 lost years wouldn't be easy, or quick, or simple. But he was completely determined. This was his second chance at life, a rare and precious gift, and he wouldn't waste a single second of it. 2 months passed like a strange but wonderful dream. Julianne was recovering remarkably well. The girls were adjusting to their new school and making friends. And slowly, very slowly but consistently, they were becoming a real family. There were lunches prepared together in the kitchen, lively dinners where everyone talked about their day, quiet weekends at the country house Robert had upstate where the girls could run free through the fields. There was loud, contagious laughter, some normal family arguments, moments of tension when old wounds opened up, and moments of pure, simple joy. Robert and Julianne were still carefully navigating their own relationship. They talked for endless hours, reminiscing about the past with its sweet and bitter moments, getting to know who they had become during the long years apart, rediscovering each other. They weren't officially a couple yet, didn't sleep in the same room, didn't kiss. There was too much to heal first, too much old pain to process and overcome. But there was definitely something there, palpable and real, a deep connection that had never died despite all the time and distance, a flame that continued to burn even after 2 decades of forced separation. One quiet Saturday night after the girls had gone to sleep exhausted from playing all day, they sat in the garden under the bright stars. Julianne was much better. She had gained healthy weight, and color and life had returned to her face, which was no longer pale and pained. She was beautiful again, radiant, and Robert could hardly take his eyes off her. "What are you thinking about with that dreamy look on your face?" she asked, smiling, catching him staring at her. "About how I wasted so much precious time in my life, about how many wonderful nights like this I could have spent just like this, with you by my side if I hadn't been so terribly cowardly." Julianne took his large hand in her smaller, delicate ones. "We can't change the past, Robert, no matter how much we want to. But we can build a completely different future, a better, truer one. That's exactly what I want more than anything in the world. A future with you, with the girls, a real family built on real love." She smiled that luminous smile he had loved since their university days, the one that made him feel like everything in life was worthwhile. "Then let's build that future together, one day at a time with patience and love." And there, sitting in that fragrant garden illuminated by the infinite stars, with their precious daughters sleeping safely inside, Robert finally felt with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The path to get there had been extremely tortuous, painful, filled with grave mistakes and deep regrets. But he had reached the right destination, and now from here on out he would do absolutely everything right. Not for others, not for a hypocritical society, not out of empty obligation, but for true love, genuine, deep, complicated love, the kind that is worth every imaginable sacrifice. And this new life, he knew in his heart, was just the bright beginning of their true story. Chapter 4. 6 months had passed since that rainy night when Robert found Marina and Laura at the gate of his mansion. 6 months that felt like a lifetime, and at the same time, the blink of an eye. Spring had arrived in New York, bringing colorful flowers to the garden and a gentle warmth that promised better days. Robert was in his office when his secretary Claudia entered with a worried expression. "Mr. Anderson, your mother is here. She insists on speaking with you." Robert felt his entire body tense. Since that phone call at the hospital, he hadn't spoken to Margaret. She had tried to get in touch a few times, but he had ignored every attempt. Part of him knew he would have to face her eventually, but he hadn't expected it to be today. "Send her in," he said finally, mentally preparing himself for the confrontation. Margaret Anderson entered the office with her usual erect and elegant posture. At 70, she was still an imposing woman, wearing a navy blue Chanel suit and pearls around her neck. But Robert noticed something different about her. There was a fragility in her eyes he had never seen before. "Robert," she said simply, stopping in front of his desk. "Mother," he replied, keeping his voice neutral. "What brings you here?" Margaret took a deep breath, as if gathering her courage. "I came to apologize." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert stood completely still, unsure if he had heard correctly. An apology? Margaret Anderson, the woman who never admitted she was wrong, was apologizing? She sat in the chair across from the desk without waiting for an invitation, suddenly looking smaller, older, I've spent the last 6 months thinking, Robert, thinking about everything I've done, the choices I made. And I realized something terrible. I realized I lost my only son because of my pride and my arrogance. Robert crossed his arms, still suspicious. Go on. Margaret looked down at her own hands, avoiding his gaze. When you were a child, after your father died, I swore I would do anything to protect you, to ensure you had the best of everything, that you would never face hardship. But somewhere along the way, I confused protection with control. I wanted so badly to determine your future that I forgot to let you live your own life. You intercepted Julianne's letters, Robert said, his voice hard. You kept me from knowing my own daughters for 7 years. How can you call that protection? I was wrong, Margaret admitted, and for the first time, Robert saw tears in her eyes. Completely wrong. I was so afraid that woman would use you, hurt you, that I couldn't see that she truly loved you. And when I found out she was pregnant, I panicked. I thought she was going to destroy everything we had built, so I made the decision to hide it from you. And you never thought about how that would affect me, how it would affect Julianne and the girls? I did, Margaret whispered, but I convinced myself I was doing the right thing, that in time you would forget her, be happy with Patricia, build the life I had planned for you. But I was wrong about everything. You were never happy with Patricia, and those girls, your daughters, struggled, while you had more than enough resources. I caused so much suffering because of my stubbornness. Robert stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city below. Part of him wanted to scream, to throw his mother out and never see her again. But another part, the part that was still a son, wanted to understand, wanted to believe she was truly sorry. Why now? He asked without turning around. Why come here after 6 months? Because I'm old, Robert, and old enough to understand that money and status mean nothing when you're alone. You are my only son, and those girls are my only granddaughters. I wasted 6 months out of foolish pride when I could have been getting to know them, but I'm afraid it's too late, that you'll never forgive me. Robert turned to face her. I don't know if I can forgive you, Mother. Not now. You took 7 years with my daughters from me. 7 years that will never come back. I know, and I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. But I'm asking for a chance to meet my granddaughters, to try to fix at least some of the damage I've caused. I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness, just a chance to prove I can change. Robert studied his mother for a long moment. She seemed genuinely repentant, but he had been deceived by her before. I'll think about it, he said finally, and I'll talk to Julianne and the girls. The decision isn't just mine. If they don't want to meet you, you'll have to accept that. Margaret nodded, discreetly wiping away her tears. That's fair. It's more than I deserve. After she left, Robert stood there processing the conversation. Was it possible to rebuild that relationship, or was the damage irreparable? That night, after the girls had gone to sleep, Robert told Julianne about Margaret's visit. They were sitting on the veranda, a glass of wine in their hands, the gentle night breeze carrying the scent of the garden flowers. What do you think? He asked. Should I give her a chance? Julianne was quiet for a moment, thoughtful. Look, Robert, I'm not going to lie. Part of me still holds a lot of anger towards her, for everything she did, for all the years she stole from us. But another part understands that she is your mother, and that the girls deserve to know their grandmother if she has truly changed. What if it's all a lie? What if she hurts the girls? Then you cut her out of your lives for good. But I think you'll regret it if you don't at least give her a chance. People can change, Robert. We're proof of that. Look at how much has changed in 6 months. Robert took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. You were always wiser than me. Julianne smiled, that smile that still made his heart race. Not wiser, just more forgiving, perhaps. Life has taught me that holding grudges only hurts ourselves, and honestly, I want the girls to grow up knowing their whole family, even the complicated part. I'll talk to them tomorrow then. The next day, a Sunday, Robert gathered Marina and Laura in the living room after breakfast. Julianne was by his side, a silent support. The girls sensed the seriousness of the moment and sat attentively. "Girls," Robert began, "I want to talk to you about something important. My mother, your grandmother, came to visit me yesterday." Marina frowned immediately. "The lady who didn't want to meet us?" Robert nodded. "Yes, but she came to apologize. She said she was wrong, that she wants to meet you, to be a part of your lives." "And you believe her?" Marina asked suspiciously. "I don't know," Robert admitted honestly, "but I'm willing to give her a chance. However, the decision isn't just mine. Do you want to meet your grandmother?" Laura looked at Marina, waiting for her older sister to decide. Marina was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful beyond her years. "Will she be nice to us?" she finally asked. "Or will she look at us with a mean face because we were poor?" Julianne came closer and knelt in front of Marina. "My dear, you are not poor. You were poor. Now you are part of a family that has resources. But more importantly, you are incredible, brave, special people. And if your grandmother can't see that, then the problem is hers, not yours." Marina thought for a bit longer. "Okay," she said finally. "We can meet her. But if she's mean to Mom or Laura, I don't want to see her again. Ever." Robert smiled, proud of his daughter's maturity. "Deal. If she's mean to any of you, she's out of our lives for good." 2 weeks later, on a sunny Sunday in October, Margaret was invited for lunch at the mansion. Robert watched his mother arrive, noticing details that would normally go unnoticed. She arrived 15 minutes early, something unheard of for someone who always made a point of arriving punctually or even strategically late to show importance. She was wearing a simpler outfit than usual, a light-colored dress instead of the formal suits she preferred. And she carried not only expensive gifts for the girls, imported dolls from Germany, and sophisticated educational games from France, but also something wrapped in yellowed tissue paper that looked old. "Margaret," Robert said as he greeted her at the door, warning her gently but firmly, "material gifts won't buy their affection. They need genuine presents, not expensive things." She nodded, swallowing her pride. "I know, but I brought something special, something from my past that I want to share with them." When Margaret entered the spacious living room and saw Marina and Laura in person for the first time, she stopped completely, frozen in place. The girls stood beside Julianne, who kept a protective and encouraging hand on each of their shoulders. Marina wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress, her hair tied back in a ponytail. Laura had chosen a pink dress with small embroidered flowers, her hair loose and falling in waves over her shoulders. "My granddaughters," Margaret whispered, and Robert saw something he had never seen before on his mother's face. Genuine, raw emotion, without the masks of control she always wore. Tears formed in her usually cold and calculating eyes. "You are even more beautiful than in the pictures Robert showed me, and you have her eyes," she added, looking at Julianne. "The same deep green eyes." Marina took a step forward, always the brave and protective one. She studied her grandmother with her characteristic intensity, evaluating, deciding if she could trust her. "Hi, Grandma," she finally said in a voice that tried to sound confident, but carried a slight tremor of nervousness. "Dad said you want to meet us. He said you were sorry." Margaret slowly knelt, something Robert had never in his entire life seen his mother do. She had always been a woman who looked down on everyone, literally and figuratively. But there, at that crucial moment, she brought herself to the girl's level, eye to eye, in a clear demonstration of humility. "Yes, my dear, I want to meet you very much. And yes, I am deeply sorry. I made a terrible, truly unforgivable mistake. Out of stupid pride and ignorant prejudice, I missed out on knowing the most beautiful and special granddaughters any grandmother could ever dream of having. I robbed you of a grandmother, and I robbed myself of you. I hope I can make up for it in some way. If you give me that precious chance." Laura, naturally more confident and less suspicious than her sister, took a curious step forward. Her eyes shone with genuine interest. "Do you like to draw?" "I love to draw. I draw every day. I have a whole sketchbook full of drawings." Margaret smiled, and Robert recognized that expression. It was the same soft, genuine smile she had in the few old photos from her youth, before she became the hard, controlling woman he knew. Actually, when I was young, about your age, I loved to paint with watercolors. I spent years painting landscapes and flowers. I stopped when I got married and took over the family business, but I never forgot the joy I felt with a brush in my hand. Perhaps you could show me your drawings. I would love to see the work of such a talented artist. Laura practically jumped for joy. Can I? Can I really show you? I have some here in the living room. She ran to a bookshelf where she kept some of her favorite works. While Laura excitedly showed her drawings, explaining each one with enthusiastic detail, Marina continued to watch her grandmother closely. Margaret picked up the package wrapped in tissue paper and handed it to Marina. "This is for you," she said gently. "It's not expensive like those other gifts. In fact, it's very old, but it has immeasurable sentimental value to me." Marina carefully unwrapped the package and found an old book of fairy tales with a time-worn leather cover and delicate illustrations on the yellowed pages. "It belonged to my mother," Margaret explained, her voice choked with emotion. "Your great-grandmother. She read it to me every night when I was a child before I went to sleep. And I want you to have it so you know that you are part of a long family history, even if I was too foolish to recognize it before." Marina held the book with reverence, running her fingers over the old cover. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I'll take very good care of it." And so, slowly but surely, the ice began to melt between grandmother and granddaughters. The lunch was initially tense and careful, everyone measuring their words, but gradually the conversations began to flow more naturally. Margaret asked genuine questions about school, wanting to know which subjects the girls preferred, which teachers were their favorites. She asked about their musical tastes, about movies they liked to watch, about books they read, and for the first time in his life, Robert saw his mother genuinely interested in someone other than herself, listening with real attention instead of just waiting for her turn to speak. When it was time for Margaret to leave, she paused at the door and looked at Julianne. "I owe you an apology too," she said. "I judged you without knowing you. I thought you weren't good enough for my son, but I see now that you are the one who is too good for us. You raised these wonderful girls on your own in conditions I can't even imagine. You have a strength I never had, and I am so sorry for everything I did to you." Julianne was surprised, but nodded graciously. "Thank you for saying that, and thank you for coming today." After Margaret left, Robert hugged Julianne. "Did you see that? My mother apologized. To you. I think the world is about to end." Julianne laughed. "People can surprise you. Maybe she really is changing." The following months brought more profound and significant changes. Margaret began to visit regularly, always respectful, always trying to make up for lost time with genuine dedication. She took the girls on cultural outings to museums, taught Laura how to paint with watercolors using techniques she learned in her youth, and listened patiently as Marina read excerpts from her favorite books in her firm, intelligent voice. Slowly but surely, a true and loving relationship began to form between grandmother and granddaughters. Life in the mansion found its natural, welcoming rhythm. The girls were doing extremely well in school, earning excellent grades and making lasting friendships. Julianne had gone back to study architecture at Columbia, resuming the course she had abandoned 20 years ago, finally fulfilling the dream she had to postpone for so long. Robert drastically reduced his work hours, delegating responsibilities and prioritizing quality time with his family. Dinners were sacred, joyous events where everyone gathered around the large table and talked animatedly about their day, about plans, about dreams. On a warm December evening, with the New York summer approaching, Robert prepared a special surprise he had been planning for weeks. He took Julianne and the girls to the country house upstate, saying only that they needed a relaxing weekend away from the city's hustle and bustle. The girls were excited, chattering in the back seat about swimming in the pool and exploring the apple orchard. Julianne looked out the window, smiling with a peace that Robert loved to see on her face. When they arrived at the house at dusk, the sun painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Julianne was speechless. The place was magically transformed, Hundreds of twinkling white lights were strung through the old trees, creating a luminous canopy that looked like something out of a fairy tale. Fresh flowers in shades of white and pink were arranged everywhere, their soft perfume filling the air. An elegant table was set in the central garden, covered with a white linen tablecloth, fine china, and floating candles in crystal vases. The starry sky was beginning to appear, promising a perfect night. "What is all this?" Julianne asked, looking around in complete awe, her eyes shining with tears of surprise and emotion. "Robert, did you do all this?" Robert smiled nervously, his heart pounding like a teenager in love for the first time. "I had help," he admitted. "But yes, I planned every detail. Please sit, all of you." The girls exchanged knowing glances, clearly sensing that something special was about to happen. They sat on one side of the table, Julianne on the other, all looking at Robert expectantly. He remained standing, taking several deep breaths, trying to calm his nerves. His hands trembled slightly as he held a piece of paper with some notes he had made, but then he decided to put it away. This had to come from the heart, unscripted. 20 years ago, he began, his voice emotional and trembling slightly, I made the biggest mistake of my life. The mistake that has haunted me every single day since. I let go of the woman I loved more than anything in this world because of irrational fear, unforgivable weakness, and a cowardice that shames me to this day. I was 23 and thought I was making the right choice, the responsible choice. But I was just being a coward, bowing to pressure instead of fighting for what mattered most. He paused, watching Julianne discreetly wipe away a tear. I spent 2 entire decades living a completely empty and meaningless life. I had everything money could buy, but nothing that truly mattered. Every day I woke up and thought of you. I wondered where you were, if you were happy, if you had forgotten me. Every birthday that passed, every Christmas, every significant moment, I thought about what could have been if I had been braver. Marina and Laura were completely still, absorbing every word. Robert continued, his voice growing firmer. And then on a rainy May night that changed everything, that completely rewrote the story of my life, fate or divine providence gave me a second chance that I definitely didn't deserve. I found 2 little girls at my gate, hungry and scared, and when I looked into their eyes, I saw you, Julianne. I saw the love of my life reflected in those beautiful children. He looked directly at Marina and Laura now, his voice filled with pure emotion. I discovered I had 2 absolutely incredible daughters, braver than I could ever be, stronger than I ever thought possible. Daughters who survived terrible things with dignity and courage. Daughters who have taught me more about true love, about real strength, about what really matters in life in 6 months, than I learned in 45 entire years of a privileged existence. Marina was crying now, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. Laura held. Her sister's hand also moved. Robert felt his own control slipping, but he pressed on. You 2 saved me. You saved me from an empty life, from continuing to be only half a person. You gave me purpose, meaning, a reason to wake up every morning with a smile on my face, and you led me back to her. He turned his gaze back to Julianne, back to the only woman who has ever completely owned my heart. Then, with a graceful movement he had mentally rehearsed 1,000 times, Robert knelt before Julianne. Marina and Laura let out squeals, of barely contained excitement, already guessing what was coming. Julianne covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes wide and already shimmering with tears. Julianne Foster, Robert said, his voice now firm and full of absolute certainty. You are the absolute love of my life. You always have been from the first moment I saw you in that Columbia library, your hair tied up with a pencil, focused on your drawings. You always will be, until my last breath in this world. I wasted 20 precious years of my existence out of fear and cowardice, but I don't want to waste a single day more, not another hour, without you officially by my side. He took a small blue velvet box from his pocket and carefully opened it, revealing a diamond ring that sparkled brightly under the soft lights. Marry me? Not because it's socially expected, not because society dictates the rules, but because I love you infinitely more than I can express in simple words. because I want to spend the absolute rest of my entire life making you happy, making up for every bitter tear you shed because of me, every moment of pain I caused." Julianne was crying freely now, tears streaming down her radiant face. The girls were on their feet, completely excited, jumping and shouting beside them. "Say yes, Mommy!" Laura yelled with all her might. "Please, say yes!" Julianne looked deeply at Robert, at the man she had loved for so long with such intensity, who had hurt her in unimaginable ways, but who had proven himself worthy of a precious second chance through his consistent actions. "Yes," she whispered at first, then repeated it louder, her voice filled with joy. "Yes, I'll marry you, of course I will." Robert placed the ring on her trembling finger and pulled her into a passionate kiss, their first true, complete kiss in 20 long years of separation. The girls clapped and screamed with happiness, running to hug them both tightly. There, under the infinite stars of the upstate sky, with crickets chirping in the background and the scent of flowers in the air, that family was finally, truly complete in every possible way. The wedding took place 3 months later, a simple but absolutely beautiful and touching ceremony in the flowery garden of the mansion. Margaret was there in the front row, crying openly with genuine emotion from the moment the music began. She had changed so much in the past few months that Robert sometimes had trouble recognizing the cold, controlling woman she used to be. Patricia sent a generous gift, a piece of contemporary art she knew Julianne would appreciate, and an elegant card wishing them sincere happiness, without any trace of rancor or bitterness. It was a classy gesture that Robert deeply appreciated. Marina and Laura were perfect flower girls, absolutely gorgeous in custom-made lavender dresses they had helped choose during several fun shopping afternoons. Marina carried a bouquet of white and lavender, roses, walking with the dignity of a princess. Laura scattered flower petals along the path, her face lit up by a radiant smile that melted hearts. The garden was transformed into a true work of art. Floral arches marked the central aisle, white chairs were lined up perfectly, and a wooden gazebo decorated with flowing fabrics and more flowers served as the altar. Musicians played violin and cello softly, creating a magical and romantic atmosphere. When Julianne appeared at the top of the small staircase leading to the garden, the whole world seemed to stand still. She wore a simple, yet stunning white dress with delicate lace details that enhanced her natural beauty. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves over her shoulders, with small white flowers woven in. She wore no veil, preferring to show her face completely, without barriers. And when her eyes met Robert's at the end of the aisle, the smile that spread across her face lit up the entire garden. Robert felt tears well up instantly. She was perfect, absolutely perfect. And she was walking towards him finally, after so many years of waiting and suffering. Marina and Laura walked beside her, one on each side, in a beautiful symbolic gesture that this was not just a wedding between two people, but the official union of a complete family. When Julianne and Robert exchanged their solemn and deeply emotional vows, there wasn't a dry eye among the guests. Even the musicians had to stop playing for a moment, too moved to continue. They had traveled an extremely long, tortuous, and painful road to arrive at that perfect moment, but every difficult step, every tear shed, every moment of pain was infinitely worth it. "Julianne Foster," Robert began, his voice breaking with emotion from the very first words. "Today I am not just marrying you, I am finally, after 20 lost years, making the promise I should have made so long ago. I solemnly promise, before God and everyone here, to love you and our daughters unconditionally, without reservation, without limits, without measure. I promise to be present for every important moment of your lives, whether small or large, significant or seemingly ordinary. I promise to be there for birthday parties and doctor's appointments, for school plays and difficult days, for achievements that deserve celebration and for failures that need comfort." He paused, wiping away the tears that flowed freely down his face. "I promise to never again let irrational fear, cruel external pressure, or anything else separate us. I learned in the most painful way possible that life without you is not real life. It is just empty existence. I promise to be the man of integrity you deserve, the dedicated and present husband you always wanted, and the loving and involved father our daughters need and deserve. I promise to honor you every day, to respect your dreams, to support your ambitions, and to be by your side in good times and bad. I promise to make you laugh when you're sad, to hold your hand when you're scared, and to be your safe harbor in any storm. You are my great love, my soulmate, my best friend. And today, finally, you are my wife. Julianne was crying openly now, but her smile was radiant, illuminating her entire face. She held Robert's hands tightly, as if she never wanted to let go, and began her own vows in an emotional but firm voice. Robert Anderson, you were my first true love. That intense, overwhelming love that changes you completely and redefines what you thought you knew about life. When you left me 20 years ago, I thought my heart would never recover, and in a way it never fully did. But it also never stopped loving you, not for a day, not for an hour. Every time I looked at our beautiful daughters, I saw you in them and remembered what we had, what we lost, what could have been. She took a deep breath, the tears continuing to fall, but her voice remaining strong. Today, I solemnly promise to completely forgive the painful past and all the mistakes that were made, by you and by me as well. I promise to leave behind all the hurt, all the pain, all the resentment I held for so many years. I promise to build a bright and happy future by your side, one day at a time, with patience, understanding, and so much love. I promise to be your true partner in absolutely everything, in moments of pure joy and celebration, and also in the inevitable challenges and difficulties that life will bring. I promise to support your dreams, respect your decisions, and be by your side always in any circumstance. She looked at Marina and Laura, who were right there beside them, crying with happiness. I promise that together we will raise our wonderful daughters with unconditional love, teaching them by example to be both strong and kind, brave and compassionate, independent, but also able to ask for and accept help. We will teach them that mistakes are a part of life, but that the important thing is to learn from them and move forward. That second chances are precious and should be seized. That true love is worth any weight, any sacrifice, any pain. Turning her gaze completely to Robert, she concluded with a voice full of absolute certainty, "And I promise to love you intensely today, tomorrow, next year, in 10 years, in 50 years, and for all the blessed days God gives us together in this life. You are my eternal love, my second chance, my happy ending. And I will spend the rest of my life reminding you every day how much you are loved, valued, and important to me and to our daughters." When the officiant finally declared them husband and wife, authorizing Robert to kiss the bride, the entire garden erupted in warm, enthusiastic, and prolonged applause. Marina and Laura immediately ran to hug their parents with all their might, and the four of them stood there in a tight embrace for long moments, a family finally truly united, complete, happy, and full of hope for the future. The celebration lasted late into the starry night. There was much lively dancing, loud and contagious laughter, and emotional speeches that made everyone cry. Margaret gave a brave speech, publicly apologizing for her terrible past mistakes and sincerely promising to be the best grandmother possible from then on. Close friends and respected colleagues of Robert came to congratulate him effusively, unanimously saying they had never seen him so genuinely happy and fulfilled in his entire life. When the magical evening finally ended and the last satisfied guests had departed, Robert and Julianne stood alone on the quiet veranda, watching the bright stars in the clear sky. The girls were already fast asleep in their rooms, completely exhausted but happy from the wonderful party. "It was absolutely perfect," Julianne whispered softly, resting her head on his strong shoulder with a sigh of contentment. "You are perfect," Robert replied with infinite tenderness, gently kissing her fragrant hair. "Thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving me such a precious second chance, for believing in me when I definitely didn't deserve that trust. Everyone deserves a second chance, Robert. We all make mistakes and deserve the opportunity to fix them, and you have amply proven with your actions that believing in you was completely worth it." They stood there in comfortable, welcoming silence, just fully absorbing the perfect moment. After so much deep suffering, so much piercing pain, so much precious time lost, they were finally exactly where they were always meant to be. Together, complete, happy, fulfilled. The years that followed were unquestionably the happiest and most fulfilling of Robert's entire life. He watched his beloved daughters grow magnificently, mature, and become absolutely incredible and admirable young women. Marina pursued a brilliant career in law, determined and focused on helping vulnerable children, using her own story as motivation. Laura became a nationally renowned visual artist, her expressive and touching paintings exhibited in major galleries in New York and Los Angeles. Julianne opened her own successful sustainable architecture firm, finally realizing all the professional dreams she had to postpone for so long. Margaret was completely transformed, becoming a dedicated, loving and present grandmother, generously making up for the lost years with unconditional love and constant attention. She and Julianne developed an unexpected but genuine relationship of deep mutual respect and even true friendship. Robert never let them forget where they came from, the immense difficulties they had faced together. He created a comprehensive social foundation that helped at-risk and homeless children, giving them educational opportunities and support that Marina and Laura almost didn't have. It was his personal way of giving back to society, of transforming past pain into meaningful present purpose. One quiet evening, many precious years later, Robert was sitting in the same fragrant garden where he had married Julianne. She was by his side as always, her hair now streaked with silver, but still as beautiful and radiant as ever in his loving eyes. The girls, now accomplished adult women, visited regularly with their own loving partners, and eventually with small grandchildren who filled the mansion with joy. "Do you regret anything?" Julianne asked on one such evening, holding his wrinkled but still strong hand with affection. Robert thought carefully for a long moment before answering, "I deeply regret losing so much precious time at the beginning, not being brave and strong when I should have been, but I don't regret for a second where we finally ended up together. Everything we went through, as painful as it was, brought us here, to this perfect moment. And this moment, this life we've built, is absolutely perfect." Julianne smiled that luminous smile he had always loved, resting her head on his shoulder with confidence. "It is perfect. It was completely worth waiting for you, for us." And it truly was worth every second, because in the end, after all the bitter tears shed, all the mistakes made, all the pain endured, true love won gloriously. Love always wins when it is genuine and true, when it is strong enough to survive the relentless passage of time and cruel distance, when it finds the courage to grant precious second chances. Robert looked up at the infinite stars above, feeling a deep and overwhelming gratitude flood his heart. He had almost lost absolutely everything to paralyzing fear and unforgivable cowardice, but fate or providence was kind and merciful enough to give him an unexpected second chance, and this crucial time he did not waste a single second of it. He consciously chose true love. He chose real family. He chose genuine and lasting happiness above all else, and that fundamental choice, he knew with absolute certainty in his heart, made all the difference in the world.